I remember the moment when I figured out that I'm a people pleaser. And I was like, wow. I mean, my whole life was basically flashing in front of my eyes, all kinds of different situations. And you can't unsee that, right? So when you get to that point, all of a sudden you feel like you have this one choice, because before you didn't really have a choice, right? This is just how you were. So now you have a choice which way you want to go. And two, I think you feel more empowered. You feel like, man, I can do this now. I feel like I have some kind of a power over myself. That makes any sense.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to the Lifeonaire Show. I am your host, Jason Wojo. On the Lifeonaire Show, we help people make more, work less, love life, just absolutely live and love every moment of what they get to do every day. I am joined by my co-host, and actually this is a little bit of an interesting episode because he's my co-host, but at this time I'm actually I'm kind of interviewing you, I guess, right? Like I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to hold the light up in your face and give you a shock if you answer incorrectly. So, Polish Peter, welcome to your interview session.
So thank you for having me. And I'm really excited about this particular episode because we both know this is going to be the best episode ever because how much better of a host could you get?
I am the host. I thank you for that. So I appreciate that. So thank you.
I guest, okay?
I appreciate that.
This is going off the rails already.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be a nightmare. This is just gonna be this is just gonna be like a train wreck. So listen, dude, you and I. So first of all, for those of you who don't know, I've known Peter for a while, and you guys have heard if you've been listening to Lifeonaire Show for any period of time, and it's not a lot of time because it's still a new podcast. But if you've been listening, you know that Peter and I kind of jab each other and we rib each other, and that's just part of our friendship. And actually, Peter was introduced to me by Wendy Patton, who Wendy and I were in a Lifeonaire mastermind group together. And she introduced us because we were both kind of going through some things in our lives, or in particular, and actually we were going through divorces. I think I was a little bit ahead of you in that process, Peter, but it was pretty close in terms of the timing. And so Peter and I just totally hit it off. And he was actually best man at my wedding to my wife now. And so we just have a really strong friendship. That's been built, and by the way, this is how guys like show their affection is by making fun of each other. That's just like this. That's just the way we do it. And so,
I don't make fun of you ever.
No, of course not. I mean, absolutely. And so, this is an interview though I've been wanting to do with Peter because Peter's a guy who has a great story. And what we're going to focus on in this episode is limiting beliefs and blind spots, which all of us have, man, right? Like, I don't care how advanced you are. Like, it doesn't matter who we're talking about, whether we're talking about someone like Tony Robbins or someone like, like a Warren Buffett, someone who you look at as being like the absolute pinnacle of achievement in whatever their chosen fields is, or it could be, even down to our kids, to children, and everyone in between has blind spots and limiting beliefs. And so we're gonna focus on this a little bit in this session here. How did you start to develop your interest in these things, in blind spots? Are we gonna talk about blind spots mostly?
Well, yeah, we can talk about either one, but I think one of the things that interested me is, and I feel like for me personally, I've been thinking about humans and the human psychology and like, why do we do the things that we do, right? That was always kind of my interest. But what really turned it on is, like you mentioned in the beginning of the particular episode, is the whole divorce thing. Because in that moment, after I went through the divorce, I thought I was doing everything right. Even up to that point, right? When it comes to my marriage, when it comes to raising my kids and everything, I thought I was doing things right. And then the divorce happened and I was like, what the heck? What is going on here, right? How did I actually arrive here? So that's when I just dove deep into figuring out who I am. Why is it that I'm doing the things that I'm doing, and all the patterns and figuring out like how brains work and the neuroscience. And that's where I actually found out about the whole blind spots thing, and why we all have them and how that actually works.
Man, so blind spots, I think of like, and I think there are legitimate blind spots that people have. Mm-hmm. And then I also think there are blind spots that are like, if you just turn your head a little bit more to the left, you would see it. Like there are blind spots, I know, at least in my life, where I kind of knew it was there, but I didn't want to acknowledge it.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? And that's a great point, because some people will literally feel like, even like when you already know that you have that particular blind spot, right? You will not turn your head to acknowledge it, because what is it going to mean? Are you going to have to now take a different course of action? Are you going to have to admit it? Are you going to have to, go and own up to it? And that for some people is kind of scary, and maybe don't want to do it because, well, what does that mean about me? That I'm not good enough, or I'm not this, or I'm not that, and they get really confronted with themselves.
So tell us about a blind spot you had, like that, like you mentioned your marriage, like where did that come from? How did you recognize you had it, and what effect did that have on your marriage?
All right. So listen, before I go into that, I just want to clarify blind spot. If we know about driving, when you're driving the car, you have a blind spot in your car, right? You something that you don't see, like a car that's in the side mirror, that you don't actually see it. And what ends up happening is at some point, you either look over, or the car speeds up, or it slows down. And if you're trying to merge over into the lane, all of a sudden in a split second, you see that thing, and then you take a different course of action. So that's an important distinction, I think, to realize is when you see that blind spot that has an impact on you, like all of a sudden, if you see the car in your blind spot, and if you merge over, you're going to crash, right? There's a big impact that happens there. There's a big accident, right? Your life depends on it. But if you think about it from a life point of view, and you see that blind spot and you see the impact of it, immediately you start taking a different course of action, because how big of it is. So the way I've developed that, through the training, I have the coaching conversations and all the kinds of things. And what I've discovered is those blind spots happen very early on in our age, when we're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. In that time frame between about 5 to 12 is when they first start to initially develop. As we're growing up, as we're listening to our parents, as we're going to school, as we are going to different things. So to give you an idea, let's consider for a minute that, Johnny is sitting in the classroom and teacher asks a question, right? For instance, he says something like, what's 5 times 3? And everybody's raising their hand and they're like, yeah, me. And Johnny's really excited about that. And he's all about, pick me. And the teacher, goes, well, Johnny, what's 5 times 3? And Johnny, in all his excitement, goes 16. And all of a sudden, the whole class laughs, because kids, are kids, right? And in that moment, teacher says, that's a wrong answer, Johnny. And Johnny's like, well, maybe I just am not good enough. I don't know how the answers, right? Maybe I should, not say as much. So then this little seed gets planted in Johnny's head, right? And then Johnny goes home and hangs out with the family and starts playing with his brother or whatever. And he wants to come up with a game that they want to play. And he goes, I got a great idea on the game. We can do this. And his brother goes, well, that's stupid. That's a stupid game. And all of a sudden, Johnny goes, there's another stupid thing, right? So now another seed gets planted. And then different actions. Maybe there's only, he goes playing outside with the other friends, or in the home, dad or mom says something that's very similar to that. And what ends up happening is that seed starts to grow more and pattern starts to be, created. And all of a sudden, Johnny feels like, you know what? I need to make sure that I know the answer exactly 100%. I know the answer before I answer it, because otherwise I'm stupid. I don't want to be that, So guess what? From that kind of a person, what ends up happening is a person who in life has to know the answers all the time, 100% before they even take any action. Those are called perfectionists, right? And you start living life that way. So I've seen those kinds of things in my life, as I was growing up. And, one particular thing that I share at the 3 days when we do, or even on podcasts is
the Get a Life Getaway you're talking about.
The Get a Life Getaway. Yep. Then when you do these particular, because I think it's important for people to see that, because most of them, they don't even know that such a thing exists, right? So when I was, as some of you listeners might know, I'm originally from Poland. This is not a Texas accent. This is a Polish accent, right?
Thank you for clarifying
clarification, right?
Yeah.
I know, because I have to do that sometimes, you know what I mean? So what happened is, as we were growing up, my dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive both mentally and physically with my mom and me. And he spent most of the time in the bar. So I never really knew my dad like typically people would know. Never really know about him hanging out with us or anything like that, with me even. So I didn't have that male model up to that point of my life, right? And I remember one particular day, we were sleeping at home. It was about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And he came in, and we're living in this hotel room. So it's literally a hallway, and there was room on each side, and different families live in each room. So when he came in, he woke us up, and he wanted to have money to go back to the bar. He was already kind of drunk. Well, he was pretty drunk, I guess, actually. So he starts, fighting and with my mom, and they're yelling. And whether my mom had the money or not, which I think actually she did not have the money because we were poor. And they start fighting. And before you know it, it's physical. And I'm freaking out as a little kid, right? I'm trying to stop this thing. And I'm yelling. I'm trying to get him to stop. And I jump on his back. And he throws me off because I'm, 8 years old. So I'm in my whole kind of trying to figure out what to do in that particular moment. I run into a little kitchenette that we had off to the side. I grab the frying pan. And if you can imagine for a moment, like you have a couch, right? And there's an arm of the couch on the side. I stood up on that arm of a couch because I could be tall enough. And he was, with his back towards me. So I took a frying pan and I hit him over the head with the frying pan. And he went and passed away.
Passed out.
Yeah,
passed out.
Yeah.
Didn't pass away.
Yeah,
you didn't kill him.
That's right. Okay, yes. That's a good clarification. Thank you, because someone might be looking
Peter
for
killed
me
his
now.
dad.
Yeah, someone might have been looking for it. But anyway, he passed out. But I remember in that moment that I said to myself, I hate how you are being right now. I don't want to be like you. I hate to being like you. I will never be like you. I will make sure that people like me because I don't like you, right? Can you imagine a kid saying something like that, right? And what kind of a person can come out of that? Well, that's a people pleaser, right? I will always make sure that people like me because I don't like you. So in my life, and by the way...
So let me pause you right there.
Yes.
So you realized at that young age that there was a cost to having people not like you, right?
Well, yeah, because in that moment, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't like you, his own son kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't like you right now. So that was a pretty big impact. I didn't realize till about I was, divorced in 2011 that I was a people pleaser though. That was the whole time was my blind spot. Because people have told me, over the years that, dude, stop, making everybody happy. Stop pleasing everybody. Stop doing this. And I didn't realize it. I just knew that this was what I needed to do until that moment came when I was having a conversation with someone and I started going back in my life and realized what happened in that moment. I was like, all of a sudden, like all the dominoes kind of fell together. And I was like, what? No way. Right. So that's why this is a blind spot, but it has impacted my life tremendously in all different areas.
So how did being a people pleaser influence your relationship with your wife?
Well, there's positive and negatives to it, right? Because the blind spot can actually be a good thing, can be a bad thing. Well, the problem is that the bad thing, the people pleaser in my wife was that, give you an example. She would ask me, hey, let's go out to dinner. Where you want to go? Guess what people pleaser says?
Where do you want to go? Wherever you want to go.
Wherever you want to go, right?
Right.
She's like, well, you pick. Well, what restaurants do you want to go? We'll go wherever, right? And every single answer that I will have with her, it was like, well, babe, I just want you to be happy. So wherever you want to go. So my whole reason, right, in my marriage was to make her happy, right? And if you know anything about men are about making the woman happy. So it was make her happy. And that was my way of making her happy. Agreeing with her, going and whatever you want to do. And guess what? All she wanted to do is for me to be the man.
To step up.
And step up, take action, and make a decision.
So
I even see that actually.
Right. Well, and like you said, it could be in some areas of your life that's probably served you. in this particular area, it harmed you because she was looking for someone to lead, and as a people pleaser, maybe you let others lead more often.
Yeah, I did that, and then I started looking from all kinds of different areas. It's not just my relationship with my wife, but in the business side. Business side had a huge negative impact up to that point. My business was struggling. And one of the reasons was because I was trying to please every single client. And I would say, yes, I'll got it. I do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, right? And at the end of the day, I was working insane amounts of hours. I wasn't getting everything done because I was trying to make sure everybody's happy, right? And out of the whole thing, nobody was happy, and including me.
Do you think, I'm listening to you, man. Do you think the blind spots are always going to be blind spots? Meaning, like in this case, what I'm hearing is a people pleaser. You recognize you're a people pleaser. Do you think you're still a people pleaser? And is that something you have to you wrestle with daily? You have to remind yourself and pull yourself back, like to not do that because you've been doing it for so long. It's almost part of your identity. And this is, by the way, what I'm wondering now is this is an instance of, because you have blind spots of like behavior. You have blind spots of beliefs, you have blind spots of thoughts, of actions, but you also have blind spots of identity, perhaps. And in this case, it sounds like you formed an identity early on that has been following you for many, many years now. What is that like for you now that you know it's there?
Well, that's a great question, because now that I know it's there, I get to consciously, in those moments, choose whether or not I want to go one way or the other. You know what I mean? Do I want to go say, hey, wherever you want to go, babe? Or do I go and step up? Because before it was subconscious. It was just kind of running me. Now, because I know that, I can literally get on the court, right, take action and just go and do this, And yeah.
And so you can make now you have the conscious choice to make versus previously it was an unconscious choice that you were just by default pursuing. So now you're aware, and now you can choose a different action.
Right. Yeah. And it has actually, as far as my identity goes of the whole people pleaser, like let's consider like the people pleaser was like this height, big, this size, for those of you who are watching.
Oh yeah,
we're listening.
Check out YouTube. Peter's showing us.
So if it was like, 99% people pleaser of 100, now I'm maybe like 40, 60 kind of a thing, right? So it's a lot less. And I know what I know about myself. I know myself a lot better, Well, that's an important aspect. And I got the impact of what being 99% people pleaser does for me. So I know I not to go there.
I just totally had an epiphany right there when you said that. What you also did, so I saw step one was identifying the blind spot. Step two is you have a conscious decision to make a different change, a different choice. But what I'm also thinking too is you went from 99% to whatever, you said 40%, whatever. You saw the effects of that 40% and noticed that, hey, you know what? I'm okay. Like people still like me, and I don't have to bend over backwards. I don't have to submit to their will every single time. And so what you've done is, like, through taking action, now you've seen the results of that action, which is further going to give you more confidence to move in the direction that you want. And of course, not saying that you can't do nice things for people, but it's a conscious choice now. And as you have kind of reduced that percentage of people pleaser in you, and you've seen that you're doing well and maybe even better than before, like it's had some positive effects in your life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because here's the thing. One thing that can happen is when people get this impact and they're like, oh, people pleasing is such a bad thing, right? It has ruined my most important relationship. So what I need to do is I need to flip it totally and not be a people pleaser at all, right? That's a whole another game. That, think about it. Would you want to hang out with someone who doesn't care about other people, what they think, how they feel, right? There is no even a little bit of people pleaser in them, right? You probably would not. And people typically, because then they become selfish, right? This person is totally selfish and they don't care about others. So there is the happy medium to figure it out. And knowing that it's like 40, 50, 60%, it works well in my relationship when I know what I know. and I'm unconscious about it.
Well, because people pleasers especially, like you can get walked all over very easily.
Yeah.
And then people lose respect for you, and then it creates a cascade of a number of negative things, you know. And I think everyone has, you know, maybe it's not a people pleaser, but everybody has these things. Any other examples from your life that you can think of blind spots for you? You know, I don't know if you're okay with me bringing this up, but I remember when you first started dating, after you were finally I know it took a while for you to move forward. One of the blind spots you had, I remember you saying, is like, who's going to date? Like, no, I can't remember if you said who's going to date or no one's going to date, like a guy with 3 kids. And I was like, whoa, hold on. So that was a belief that you've since proven wrong, but like that could have been, I don't know if it would be considered a blind spot, a limiting belief. We might be blurring the lines here on this one. Right. But I remember that came up for you.
Right. And that's more of like a limiting belief because what happens a lot of times with the beliefs, they can be internal, can be external, right? And a lot of me for that particular belief came from the external factors.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I mean, my mom would say, you know, you remember you got 3 kids now. It's not like you're going to be able to go and, you know, find somebody, you know, and all that kind of stuff and seeing society, how it operates and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times those beliefs can come from that. And that's the important thing to this, you know.
Yeah.
No.
Well, what I also just got right there is like, it's just so whether it's a limiting belief or a blind spot, both of those are typically the result of an experience or others around us, or you know, something that's happened to us, and so they just kind of show up differently in our lives. You know, I certainly had, and I mean, I'm sure I still have limiting beliefs I don't even know about yet, right? I think
you got so many. I don't even want to spoil them all for you.
Right. I don't even.
I just keep it in my back pocket and one of those.
Right. Seriously, like, I remember, you know, a limiting belief I had in regards to my marriage was like, a blind spot was I totally didn't have the ability. Well, I don't know if I'm looking back and I don't know if I did this consciously or unconsciously, but I couldn't put myself in my ex-wife's shoes of being in a different country, away from her family, you know, and a lot of other challenges we had, like, and I don't know if I was afraid to do it because it would affect me somehow, or I don't know if I just minimized it, like, and just thought it wasn't a big deal, or I don't know if I was aware. You know, of course, looking back it's so hard to do objectively, because we you know, there's such a bias when you look back, like a hindsight bias. But that was totally a blind spot for me, and it affected me quite a bit. And so, like, I think all of us have these blind spots. You know, the other thing I think that can show up for us is is blind spots that benefit us, right? Like that maybe we're not aware of, but they're drivers. And perhaps like this is something that can contribute to some of our success. So like, you know, if someone has some belief that they haven't fully realized that causes them to work and actually, I don't know. Would you agree with that? Are there blind spots that can benefit us, or is it always more powerful to know that blind spot, or could it rob us of its power if you know it?
Well, that's a good point, because I think anything in life, it all depends how we take it, how we stretch it, right? So if you think about it it's like a rubber band, right? You can stretch it to a little bit, or you can stretch it really tight, right? So anything in life, I think, when it comes to the blind spots, a lot of them happen in a very highly emotional situations, right? Emotion is really important in that, because that's when it creates this kind of a belief. Think about it. Stuff that you do on every single day that doesn't really matter. You don't create stuff like, oh, I need to, you know, why am I like this and all this stuff. It's something that's been very emotional. So those moments create how we are in life, but it also depends on how much we stretch it. Because like I said, we can go 99% with this, or we can go 40%. So being a workaholic, right? Because you maybe decided that if I don't work, you know, I'm going to end up like the person that I really have seen. Like, for instance, I could have very well in that moment made the decision that if I don't work really hard in life, if I was, let's say I was 15, 16 years old, And this is the time when now I'm starting to, as a teenager, trying to figure out who am I in life? What am I going to be doing? Kind of thing, right? Because they're like 15, 16, 17-year-olds trying to see how they fit into this whole society, right? So in those moments, for instance, if I saw my dad being alcoholic and all that kind of stuff and seeing how his life goes down, I could have made the decision in some situation like, I need to work my butt off because I don't want to end up like you. And what ends up happening sometimes is workaholic tends to work 60, 80, 90 hours, 100 hours a week, right? And what happens with the family? What happens with divorce, right? Woman leaves or whatever because she's never home.
Well, and so for somebody who works a lot, like that could be, so they may justify that, right? They may say, hey, I'm doing it for my family, or I'm doing it for this reason or that reason. But if they can uncover that blind, so on one hand, having a healthy work ethic can be valuable, but with a blind spot that is motivating it, it could be a big detriment, and it can cause you other problems. So in this case, so there could be a blind spot, number one, here in the challenges and the sacrifices that your family is enduring because you're working. You may not be aware of it, or be unwilling to look at it. Like we just talked about, like I just mentioned before, I'm not sure if I was unwilling to look at this or not. So you could be unwilling to look at that blind spot. There could be a blind spot as to why you're working so hard. There may also be a blind spot as to you don't want to look at that blind spot, why you look so hard, because maybe it's, quite frankly, just for your own ego. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it could be for your own ego. You want to make $300,000 this year. You want to be looked at as the man or the woman. You want to be looked at and felt that you're important and that you're significant. Like I think it's really important. I think it's important to figure this stuff out so that you can use it moving forward. And but what I meant before is like, is it valuable to look at this or not? Because what if somebody figures out that they really work so hard because they get approval and recognition there, and that decreases their motivation and their drive. Someone may say like, well, you've hurt that person because now they're not as motivated. And I would say perhaps, well, no, now we can just help them find that in a place that's more fulfilling and sustainable in their life, like in a way that doesn't hurt other parts of their life.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on there right now is, and we both do really aware of this, is Tony Robbins' 6 human needs. Yeah. And what ends up happening is, for those of you who don't know, there are 6 human needs, and there is certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, growth and contribution. So basically what it means that on some level, we want to meet those needs. So in my case, for instance, right, the whole people pleaser thing, guess which need I was striving to meet this whole time?
Connection, love and connection, probably, right?
Well, actually, you know what? That was one of them, but more important than that, the significance.
Oh, okay.
Because what has been happening is I was so important to everybody's life, right? So I'm going to make sure that I'm the person who's going to meet them, right? That I'm going to help them. That I'm
you get the call. You're going to,
right? And win the business, right? And all those kinds of things. And with my wife, right? Guess what? If I am not, being significant in that way, I'm not doing stuff for her, making sure that I'm people pleaser and all that kind of stuff, I'm not a significant person as much in her life, right? And that was kind of like, which, is very close to the love and connection, because guess what? The fears that we have is, I'm not loved, right? So, but there's a strong pull towards fulfilling all those human needs. So for those of you listening to the podcast, I would encourage you to look in your life and ask yourself the question: what areas of my life don't work as well as I would like them to? Right? Is there complaints that I have about myself or about my life, or someone who is very close to me in my life has those complaints about me? Could there be a blind spot there, right? Could there be something that I'm trying to meet that I haven't been really conscious of? And start examining that area. One of the best ways to just either, if you have someone in your life, have them ask you questions, like, why is that important to you? Why do you feel like you need to do that? Is there some kind of a situations from your past that pops up in your mind, right? That's you've kind of aware of, and start examining that. And you might very well come up with like what those blind spots are. And then when you listen, when you find that blind spot, when you are present to it, I remember the moment when I figured out that I'm a people pleaser. And I was like, wow. I mean, my whole life was basically flashing in front of my eyes, all kinds of different situations. And you can't unsee that, right? So when you get to that point, all of a sudden you feel like you have this one choice, because before you didn't really have a choice, right? This is just how you were. So now you have a choice which way you want to go. And two, I think you feel more empowered. You feel like, man, I can do this now. I feel like I have some kind of a power over myself. That makes any sense.
You know, yeah, and totally. So one thing that you said that just struck me too is like most of these blind spots are a result of our past, and it can be either a one-time, perhaps a super impactful, acute experience you have. Like in a moment, it can be decided, or it can be a bunch of small, repetitive things that over time end up kind of accumulating, so that you move down the path. It could be either acute or chronic, just like an injury. But also, I'm thinking of blind spots as to, for instance, like why people don't do the things they say they want to do, or why they have a struggle with something, why they have a substance abuse issue. I had a student once who was grossly overweight, clinically like way off the BMI scale. Like I think it's like whatever the highest one is for obesity, and come to find out, after working with her for quite some time, she didn't fully recognize this until we had the discussion. She had been overeating because she had a couple of incidents in her life of being going through some bad things with men, where men had done some terrible things to her. And so she, as a way of protecting herself, gained this weight so that she would no longer be attractive to men. And she always wondered why she had a problem losing weight. Well, it's because she had this blind spot as to why she even gained it in the first place. And so that was a really powerful revelation for her. In a terrible situation. But now that she was able to kind of identify that, now, by the way, just like your process of going down from 99% people pleaser to whatever 40% is a process, identifying that blind spot is only the first step. Now you actually have to do something about it, right? And so that's kind of like the next step in the evolution of this. What can people do? Like once they're aware of that blind spot, what do you do with that information?
Well, one is obviously action, right? Because without action, nothing happens. So whatever it is that you're trying to do in life. So for instance, I'll give you an idea. When I discovered about my blind spot, and at that point I was already divorced, right? And I was trying to start my business, get going, because during my divorce, I literally let go of my entire business to a point where, I mean, I used to have a big list of customers and clients and prospects, and I've literally let go. So my whole entire business went out the window. So when I finally discovered the whole thing about people pleaser, I started looking at how I operate in life when it comes to my business. So I knew in that moment that I need to get a handle on this. So the actions I started taking is putting things in the calendar for me to basically create these boundaries so I don't get out of the way, right? So what I mean by this is this. For those of you who know me, Vojo, you know this very well. There's a reason why I work between the hours of 10 o'clock and 2:30, 3 o'clock, right? And that is because my kids are a little bit older now, but I used to be dropping them off at school in the morning. And the last one was finishing up at 9 o'clock, and then started picking them up at 2:30. And that was a big driver for me to keep me going. So in order for me to keep that people pleaser at bay kind of a thing, I had to, and be successful in life, I had to put these boundaries in place for myself, and using other people, like helping accountability partners, right? Or putting the calendar, like literally on my calendar right now, when I have coaching calls, it says it's from, let's say, 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So there is a very strong boundary that doesn't allow me to go over because I need to be able to be there for somebody else. Does that make sense? Like,
yes. Yep.
You know yourself, right? And you start putting different boundaries, different things in place to get you out of that huge 99%er.
Right. And one thing I think I know some of these will be very specific on that blind spot, but there's things you can do, and then the other thing, one of the things I think that's universal is getting around the right people and finding people to help you keep you accountable, because that'll be valuable as well. Yeah, man.
Totally. Because guess what? When you're a people pleaser, or where you are that 99%er, right? Well, whatever it is, workaholic, a people pleaser, or you are, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now, but let's just use those two things. You will come up with so many different excuses to make that work, right? I mean, I came up with 20,000 different reasons why this people pleaser is such an important thing at that 99%. So when you have someone in your life who can keep you accountable, like for instance, Lifeonaire, the great thing is like with my coaches, right? Or the people around my group, they can literally keep me accountable to it. Now those excuses, they don't work as well. And that's an important thing for you to have, because that's when you start to minimize that big, 99%er.
Right. Man, I don't have anything else to add to this. This has been fantastic. I think it's super valuable. What I would like to do is, if you're cool with it, if you've enjoyed this podcast episode, go post a question for Peter or a comment for Peter in the Lifeonaire app. You can simply download it wherever you download apps, the iTunes Store or Google Play, and Peter and I are over there. And so you want to continue the discussion, go on over to the app. Also, I would love and greatly appreciate if you could leave us a review and subscribe to the Lifeonaire Show. It helps us reach more people. And I really want to thank you, man, for sharing some of this stuff. I think limiting beliefs, blind spots, all these things are intricately linked and have an effect on everybody. And so as people make the realization as to, where this came from, what those blind spots or beliefs are, and then have that consciousness to make better decisions moving forward and then take those steps, like it's truly an amazing thing.
Yeah, no problem, man. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. I appreciate you having me on this particular podcast. But listen, come to the app, ask a question, because, this is my passion. I want help others to open up these blind spots. I want them to discover that, because there's so much power behind that. Man, it's an amazing life when you start seeing that. So awesome. By the way, this guest was pretty awesome, wasn't he?
Yeah. You mean the host?
Oh, the guest.
You said the host earlier, so okay.
Well, now it's a guest. See,
all right, yeah. I hope everybody enjoyed this. We will catch you over in the Lifeonaire app. We will see you next week.